On a day in 1770, Joseph Banks took a shield in Botany Bay, and this began the dispossession of the land and culture of the First Nations of Australia. But the First Nations did not just give their land and identity away. They have advocated for their recognition. William Cooper was a Yorta Yorta man who worked as a shearer and lived on missions in Victoria. In the 1930s, he discovered he could not get the age pension if he remained on a mission, and so moved to Melbourne. He was always active, but in Melbourne his advocacy reached new heights. He sought to have Aborigines recognised. If he could not vote for the Parliament, he could use the tools of a democracy. By 1935, he established the Australian Aborigines League. In 1937, he circulated a petition that gathered over 1,800 Aboriginal Australian signatories. In 1938, he worked with William Ferguson and the New South Wales Aboriginal Progressive Association to organise a day of mourning, a counter-celebration to the 150th anniversary of Australia Day. In March 1938, William Cooper was told by the Australian Prime Minister, Joseph Lyons, that the petition would not be handed to the King. He did not stop advocating, because he did create networks that continued beyond him. William Cooper established National Aborigines Day, that is now NAIDOC Week. The Day of Mourning has become Invasion Day, and in 1967 there was a referendum and the Australian Aborigines gained the right to vote. They have advocated that material culture be returned to them. In 1850, the Dja Dja Wurrung lost bark etchings to a Scottish settler. He in turn sent them to a Paris exhibition in 1855, and then they were donated to the British Museum. In 2002, the British Museum loaned the bark paintings to Victoria Museum, and then Gary Murray, an elder of the Dja Dja Wurrung, began a campaign to have the bark paintings returned. He did not take them back. Instead, he used the legislation of the day to have them returned. In May 2004, he organised a petition. In June 2004, Rodney Carter, an Aboriginal and inspector, used the Heritage Act to have an emergency declaration placed on the paintings. He asked the then Minister to make a permanent declaration to recognise the paintings and end the dispute. The Victoria Museum took the matter to court, and in 2005 the items were returned to the British Museum. What was the immediate impact? Aboriginal staff and advisors walked out on the Victoria Museum. What was an intermediate effect? In 2013, the Protection of Cultural Objects on Loan was passed by the Commonwealth Government and made it far much harder for those of the First Nations to regain their cultural material. Today, there is still tension between museums and First Nations. Repatriation of objects from museums has not happened. In 2015, the British Museum will bring the Encounters exhibition to Australia. Gary Murray is still advocating for the return of those bark paintings. And with good advocacy, this will mean that the campaign for the return of objects to First Nations